Hi everyone, hope you're well. I'm going to do these three chickens looking through a barn window today. I thought they were rather cute. My sketchbook is, I think, 6x4 or 7x5, probably 7x5. I start out lightly sketching the shapes. I'm not really looking at the fact that they're chickens, it's the shapes I'm looking at. So they might look a bit strange to start with, and then I gradually refine them as I get a bit further. So there's a lot of light pencil marks and a lot of erasing. But I finally get to the look I'm hoping for, and I'm doing the shading and cross hatching. Let me know where the darks are likely to be. And then when I've done that, I'll go over it in pen, and you'll see in a moment or two the pen that I'm using is a Micron pen. I think it's 02, so it's quite fine. You could use any size you like, but the reason I'm using this particular one is the fact that it's waterproof. So you could, if you decided to have a go at something like this, I'm not brave enough to start straight with the pen, that's why I do the pencil. But the pen, you could use a ballpoint. You could use anything so long as it's waterproof, because we're going to put watercolour on top of this, and if you use a pen that isn't waterproof, you're going to lose all your lovely marks. They'll either disappear or they'll end up all fuzzy. So with this pen, it gives me the chance to go round a pencil mark, make any corrections that I like, but you'll probably notice that I haven't really drawn a straight line. I'm holding the pen a little bit further back, which allows me to make some really sort of light wiggly lines. I'm not pressing hard, and I'm just going round and trying to think what a chicken looks like. The fact that they're fluffy, they don't have straight edges, so I haven't done straight edges. I've refined a few feathers here and there on the one that's got his tail in the air, and it's just really giving me an outline and a base to start putting the watercolour on. A lot of it is observation when you're looking at these sort of pictures of animals and people and landscapes. It's all to do with observation, and the more you look at your picture or your reference image that you have, the more you'll start to see. But it's a case of what to put in and what to leave out, and I can't help you with that. It's personal choice. I like things to be fairly loose and free, sometimes verging on abstract. So, you know, we all see things differently, so you need to decide for yourself. But this is my interpretation of those chickens in that window. I'm drawing the lines here of the window ledge. It's a scrap piece of paper I've used because I couldn't find my ruler that I'd normally use, but it did the job, and it looks all right. So there's the chickens, and here we're just erasing the edges. It will lighten the pen mark slightly, but that doesn't matter. Here's my scruffy palette. I did clean the wells out, but I usually leave them full of paint. But now when I start a watercolour, obviously reminding myself here, I look for the lightest colour, and I usually start with the lightest and work towards the darkest. So I'm going to mix a colour that I feel would suit these birds, and it looks as if it's a raw sienna perhaps. And I use a lot of water in my paint when I do watercolours. So my colours are usually quite pale perhaps, and I add the water because it allows me to do soft edges and blur edges and put other colours in like I'm doing here, which is burnt sienna, and it allows that paint to run into the areas that I've pre-wet with either my brush or paint. And what I'm doing here is, because I've got quite a lot of water in that paint, I'm using a fairly dry brush, and it's the previous paint I've put down, I've been able to lift that colour off to create highlights. So here I've put down this middle chicken, I've put down my colour, and can you see how thin the brush looks? That's because I've rinsed it and then I've wiped it to take out most of the water that's there, and I'm using that brush to drag the wet colour that I've put down into the rough of the chicken, and I'm painting in the direction of the feathers, which I try to do, and that actually helps with how the colours appear at the end. Well, I think so anyway. Although this is only the first layer, I like to try and get the various colours, like the two shades of brown, the raw sienna and the burnt sienna, in to start with the light and medium tones within the birds, the chickens. Now you notice I'm holding my brush almost at the end of the silver ferrule and onto the wooden handle. The further away I hold it, the less control I have, and I quite like that, which makes it much more of a loose painting. Here I'm actually adding water and spreading that colour around to create the lighter colour. And now if you look, I've just moved down onto the ferrule and a bit closer to the hairs of the brush, so I've got a little bit more control, a bit like a pencil. So I've got control going round these tail feathers. So when I want something fairly loose and not much control, I hold my brush further away from the hairs, the pointy bit. If I want more control, I get closer to the hairs or the pointy bit. I hope you're finding the video interesting. I did enjoy doing it. I haven't done pen and wash for such a long time, and I had forgotten how nice it was, and I did really enjoy doing this. But if you're finding it interesting, you enjoy it, you know, if you'd like to give it a thumbs up and perhaps subscribe and follow me, that would be lovely. It all helps with the YouTube algorithm. They keep playing around with it, and but yeah, if you'd like to give it a thumbs up, that would be great. Right, at the moment all three birds are a little bit damp. Obviously the first one is almost dry, but obviously the one I'm working on is quite wet. Right, I'm using a slightly sort of greyed, I think it's raw umber I used, perhaps with a little tad of blue, perhaps just to grey it a little bit for the feet. And I'm using a smaller brush, you might notice. I think I only used 2 or 3 brushes on this. A general rule of thumb is the bigger the area, the bigger the brush. The smaller the area, the smaller the brush. And if you're doing detail like this, then obviously a small brush works better. I'm just checking that's dry. Doing the first layer of the comb. I know we all paint differently, but I do tend to do my watercolours in layers, and I put a light layer down, and I do have a lot of water mixed in with my paint, so they are very, I suppose you could say, delicate looking to start with, and then if I want, I can then build up on the layers afterwards. But you need to bear in mind as well that watercolours do dry a lot lighter than when you first put them down. So if you do like, you know, stronger colours, that's great, you've still got a colour there. But if sometimes on some of the pieces that I've painted in the past, my colour mix has been so pale, by the time it's dry, you can hardly tell it's there. So I need to put a little bit more paint in when I do things like that. I was a bit concerned when I did these faces of these chickens. I didn't really want them to look mean, and I was a bit worried in case one of them was starting to look a little bit a mean streak on him. Struggling here getting their beak right, because I wanted to get a bit of light on it, but I also wanted that sort of orangey colour that they have to come through, but a bit of a struggle here. That's the thing with watercolour, whilst it's still wet you can still manipulate it. Once it starts to dry you need to leave it. Once it's dry you can do stuff with it. You have to plan it. That's the thing with watercolours, you have to plan. Right, I'm now mixing up for the frame, the window frame. Got my big brush again, or the larger brush. I think this is a number 8 I'm using here. For those of you that are interested, the brushes I'm using are handmade and they're not expensive, but they're from an English company called Rosemary and Co. They're made in the Dales, I think, in England, in the north of England. They do have a website and they cater for all levels, beginner levels and experienced artists, and they do oil, watercolour, acrylic, all sorts of brushes, and they aren't expensive, which is surprising, which is lovely really, because you know, you can buy yourself a nice brush at probably half the price of what it would be a you know, a known brand name. But this one I'm using they're a Kolinsky Sable, and it's lovely because it holds a lot of water and paint, which suits my style of painting. But also you'll notice that when I was doing the downstrokes, it spreads out and holds the shape nicely. You'll see it here, see, you know, spread it out and lay it flat to get a good coverage. But then it also has a nice tip for doing there we are, doing the closer areas. And if you squeeze the ends together you can get it nice and flat like a chisel, and do a chisel edged on it. But, the colour I'm using here is called Shadow, and it's by an artist, I don't think he's with us anymore sadly, Terry Harrison. He makes, his company makes watercolour paints, and it's one of the best colours that I've found for creating shadows, and because it's fairly light, transparent, you can paint it over whatever you've laid down before, and your colours and images will actually almost shine through, but it shows that you've got a shadow there. And I use it quite a lot. I bought a tube and it's lasted ages, but it's a great colour for, you can see how dark it is there, but of course I use a lot of water so I thin it out, but it's an excellent colour for shadows. You know, if you're ever stuck, have a look at Terry, I think it's Terry Harrison. I love art. I'll have a little look for you, and I'll put it in the details below, and then if you're interested you can have a little look. I'll also put Rosemary and Co.'s website down below as well for you if you wanted to have a look at the brushes. I'll let you know which brushes I'm using as well if you're interested. This is that shadow colour going over the hatching. I'm just putting the shadows in here around this chicken's, the middle chicken's feet, and you can see how the paint colour that I'm using still allows the first colour that I've put on to show through, which I think is a lovely effect. I mean, obviously it depends how strong you have your shadow colour, but as you can see, mine's fairly watery, and it allows me just to drag over the colour, so I don't need to put too much paint on. I don't often do dry brush work. Occasionally I'll do it if I need something, you know, some grasses or whatever, but I do like a lot of water in my watercolour. I find it helps me move the paint around and manipulate the paint. But we all have our own styles and techniques, you know. I think this is my medium-sized brush. This is number 6 here, I think. I think on this I've used an 8, a 6 and a 4, but I'll put it in the details for you. I must have been a bit nervous doing that, but I kept twiddling the brush around. You probably noticed that I flit around between each of the birds. Once I'd got the first layers down and I got the back in and the frame in, I start sort of refining the look of the bird, so it's working each bird against the other, and just to make sure that they sort of fit together, if you understand what I mean. Right. One of the techniques I like is the hard and soft edge, so I'll sometimes put the colour down and then rinse my brush off and just wipe off excess water, and there's enough there then to just soften the edge and drag the colour that I've put down, in this case the red, on the comb of the chickens, and spread that up to the top. Right, the painting has dried and I'm now going back in with the black pen just to sharpen up some of the details and perhaps add a few more little bits that I feel might improve the look of the overall image. But I'm getting to the stage where we're coming to the end of the painting, and you know, you enjoy these things sometimes and you really don't want them to end, and then you start fiddling and you know, you can so easily overdo it, and what started out as something, you know, that you're really pleased with is quite overworked. But I think I managed to stop in time on this piece. So I hope you've enjoyed this little demonstration that I've done on these chickens. I thought it was rather a cute watercolour with a bit of cheeky little chicken with his bottom in the air. So if you've got this far, well done. Thank you so much for staying with me. And you know, if you have enjoyed it, perhaps you'd be kind enough to give it a like, and if you want to make a comment or drop me a comment of any description, well, within reason, I do respond to all the comments that people make, and it was lovely that you stayed with me this far. Just adding a few spatters of paint towards the end, give it a few speckles on the chickens. I think that was done in the pink. Tidying up a bit, and I think we're there. Thank you so much, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.